Heavenly Father, I pray for everyone watching this video right now. May you bless them with peace, joy, and breakthroughs in their lives. Amen. Hello, my wonderful family. I am so glad and grateful to have you here with me today. Your support means the world, and I truly don't take it for granted. Before we dive into today's powerful story, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, drop a comment below to share your thoughts, and of course, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update from this channel. Your Honor, my client is clearly attempting to manipulate this court with her condition. The words sliced through the air like a blade, and Elena Martinez felt her unborn daughter kick in response to the spike of adrenaline flooding her system. She pressed her hand to her 7-month belly, watching her husband of 12 years lean back in his chair with the same smirk he'd worn when he told her about Vivian 3 months ago. Manipulation. Elena's voice barely contained the tremor of rage. Is that what you call fighting for my daughter's future while you parade your mistress around like some kind of trophy? Alexander Rourke's steel-gray eyes flicked toward her with cold amusement. Beside him, Vivian Chin crossed her long legs and adjusted her designer dress. The same dress Elena had seen charged to their joint account last week. The same account Alexander thought she didn't monitor anymore. He had no idea how wrong he was about so many things. Ladies and gentlemen, Judge Morrison's voice cut through the tension. Let's maintain some decorum. Mrs. Martinez, you may present your opening statement. Elena's attorney, Margaret Walsh, squeezed her shoulder. They'd rehearsed this moment dozens of times, but Margaret didn't know about the flash drive hidden in Elena's purse. Didn't know about the 3 years of careful documentation. Didn't know that today, everything Alexander had built would begin to crumble. Thank you, Your Honor. Elena rose slowly, one hand supporting her back, the other resting protectively over her belly. She could feel every eye in the courtroom on her, Alexander's business partners in the gallery, the reporters who'd somehow gotten wind of the proceedings, even the bailiff who'd helped her to her feet twice already today. 12 years ago, I married a man I believed was honorable. A man who promised to build something lasting together. Her voice grew stronger with each word. Today, I stand before this court not just as a woman seeking fair division of marital assets, but as someone who has uncovered the truth about how those assets were acquired. Alexander's smirk faltered slightly. His attorney, James Rothschild, leaned over to whisper something urgent in his ear. Elena continued, her heart hammering against her ribs. For the past 3 years, while my husband believed I was simply playing the role of dutiful wife, I was actually documenting his business practices. Every offshore account, every shell company, every falsified tax document. The courtroom went dead silent. Even the court reporter's fingers had stilled over her keyboard. What my husband doesn't know, Elena said, reaching into her purse, is that I have a master's degree in forensic accounting from Columbia. A degree I earned online while he was traveling for business. Business that I now know involved money laundering for the Kozlov crime family. Alexander shot to his feet. That's completely. Mr. Rourke, sit down. Judge Morrison commanded sharply. Elena pulled out a small flash drive, holding it up for everyone to see. Everything is here. Bank records, communication logs, transaction histories. 3 years of evidence that will interest not just this divorce court, but the FBI, the IRS, and probably Interpol. Vivian's face had gone pale. She was grabbing for her purse, clearly preparing to bolt, but Alexander caught her wrist with surprising gentleness. Even now, Elena realized, he was protecting his mistress while leaving his pregnant wife to face his enemies alone. But Elena wasn't alone anymore. Not since she'd made contact with Agent Sarah Chin 3 weeks ago. Not since she'd learned that the FBI had been building a case against the Kozlov organization for 2 years, just waiting for someone on the inside to come forward. Your Honor, she said, her voice now steady as granite, I'm prepared to turn this evidence over to the court today. But I think the gentleman in the dark suits sitting in row 3 might be more interested in seeing it first. Every head in the courtroom turned toward the back, where 3 men in identical black suits sat with badges now visible on their lapels. FBI. Alexander's face had gone from pale to gray. His empire, built on laundered money, tax evasion, and connections to Russian organized crime, was about to become his prison. But Elena wasn't done. The real bomb was still coming. There's one more thing, Alexander, she said, her hand moving protectively over her belly again. About our daughter. The paternity test you demanded 3 months ago? The one you said proved this baby wasn't yours. Alexander's lawyer was frantically shuffling papers, trying to find the document. Elena smiled for the first time in months. You were right. She's not yours. But you're going to want to know who she really is, because her biological father is very, very interested in having a conversation with you about those missing $2 million from the Kozlov accounts. The money you've been skimming for the past 18 months. The blood drained completely from Alexander's face as the implications hit him. Elena watched him realize that his pregnant wife hadn't just been gathering evidence against him. She'd been working directly with his enemies. And now he owed the Russian mob $2 million while sitting in a courtroom full of FBI agents. Court is recessed, Judge Morrison announced, his voice cutting through the chaos as Alexander's world began to collapse around him. Elena remained standing, one hand on her belly, the other clutching the flash drive that would destroy everything Alexander had built. For the first time in 3 years, she felt like she could breathe. The real war was just beginning. Welcome to a story of betrayal, revenge, and the explosive power of a woman who refused to stay silent. What you're about to hear will challenge everything you think you know about love, loyalty, and the lengths someone will go to protect their child. 3 hours earlier, FBI Field Office, Lower Manhattan. Elena had been sitting in the sterile conference room for 20 minutes, watching Agent Sarah Chun pace behind the one-way mirror. Through the reflection, she could see her own image, a woman she barely recognized anymore. When had the soft curves of her face become so sharp? When had her eyes learned to calculate every angle, every risk? Are you absolutely certain you're ready for this? Agent Chen's voice crackled through the intercom. Once you walk into that courtroom, there's no going back. Alexander will know you've been feeding us information. Elena's hand moved instinctively to her belly. Inside, her daughter shifted restlessly, as if she could sense her mother's anxiety. I've been ready for 3 years. The question is whether you're ready to arrest half of his business associates when this evidence goes public. Agent Chen stepped into the room, her expression unreadable. At 35, she was only 2 years older than Elena, but her eyes held the weight of someone who'd seen too much. There's something you need to know before we proceed. Something about the father of your baby. Elena's blood chilled. What about him? Dmitry Kozlov isn't just any member of the organization, Elena. He's Mikhail Kozlov's youngest son, the heir apparent. Chin sat down across from her, studying Elena's face carefully. When you started feeding us information about Alexander's money laundering, you told us the affair was with a businessman named David Constantine. You never mentioned his real identity. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Elena gripped the edge of the table, feeling her carefully constructed world shift beneath her feet. How did you? DNA is a powerful thing. We've had Dmitry under surveillance for 6 months. When you provided us with his hair sample from your apartment, we ran it through our database. Chen's voice was gentle but firm. Elena, you're carrying the child of one of the most dangerous men in the Russian mob. A man who doesn't know he's about to become a father. Elena closed her eyes, remembering that night 9 months ago. She'd followed Alexander to the Meridian Hotel, planning to confront him about the credit card charges. Instead, she'd found him in the bar with 3 men she didn't recognize, speaking in hushed tones about offshore accounts and wire transfers. She'd ordered a drink, planning to gather intelligence, when the man with kind brown eyes and an accent like warm honey had slid onto the barstool beside her. You look like someone who needs to forget tonight ever happened, he'd said. And she'd been so tired of being the perfect wife, so exhausted from pretending she didn't notice the lies, that she'd let him buy her a drink. Then another. Then she'd let him take her upstairs to a room that wasn't Alexander's. She'd told herself it was revenge. Justice. A way to hurt Alexander the way he'd been hurting her for years. She'd never imagined she was sleeping with the enemy of her husband's enemy. Does Dmitry know about Alexander's skimming? Elena asked quietly. He suspects. That's why your husband is about to become a very desperate man. Chen leaned forward. Elena, I need you to understand what you're walking into. When the Kozlovs discover that Alexander has been stealing from them, and that you're carrying Dmitry's child, you become the most valuable person in this entire operation. To everyone. 18 months earlier, the Rourke Estate, Greenwich. Elena had been in the kitchen, preparing dinner for another one of Alexander's business associates, when she'd first overheard the phone call that changed everything. Through the thin walls of their home office, his voice had carried clearly as he spoke to someone named Victor about cleaning money and investment opportunities in properties that Elena knew didn't exist. She'd stood there, her hands covered in flour from the bread she was making, listening to her husband casually discuss federal crimes. At first, she'd convinced herself she was misunderstanding. Alexander was a real estate developer. Of course he dealt with investors and property transfers. But then came the night she'd found the burner phone hidden in his sock drawer. The phone with text messages from someone called V about shipments and percentages and keeping the old man happy. The same night she'd discovered the pregnancy test was positive. Standing in their bedroom, holding evidence of her husband's criminal activities in one hand and proof of her own betrayal in the other, Elena had made a choice that would define the next 2 years of her life. She wouldn't run. She wouldn't confront him. She would become someone else entirely. The next morning, she'd enrolled in online classes at Columbia, telling Alexander she wanted to learn bookkeeping to help with his business. He'd laughed and patted her head like she was a child playing dress-up, never bothering to ask what kind of bookkeeping she was actually studying. For 6 months, she'd lived a double life. Dutiful wife by day, forensic accounting student by night. She'd learned to read financial statements like crime novels, to trace money through labyrinthine corporate structures, to identify the telltale signs of laundering operations. And slowly, methodically, she'd begun building a case against her own husband. The hardest part hadn't been gathering evidence. It had been maintaining the facade of loving him. Present-day courthouse hallway. Elena! Elena, wait! She turned to find Alexander pushing through the crowd of reporters and FBI agents, his face desperate in a way she'd never seen before. Vivian was nowhere to be seen, probably already on a plane to somewhere without extradition treaties. "We need to talk," he said, reaching for her arm. Elena stepped back, her security detail moving closer. Agent Chin had insisted on protection the moment they'd learned about Dimitri's paternity. "There's nothing left to say, Alexander. You don't understand what you've done." His voice was raw, pleading. "The Kozlovs don't just kill people who steal from them, Elena. They destroy everything those people ever loved. Everyone they ever loved. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to skim money from the Russian mob." Elena's voice was ice, but inside, fear was blooming like a poisonous flower. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you brought criminals into our life." "Our life?" Alexander's laugh was bitter. "You mean the life where you were sleeping with my business partner? The life where you're carrying another man's baby while playing the victim?" Elena felt the baby kick hard, as if responding to the tension. "You want to know the truth about that night, Alexander? I followed you to the Meridian Hotel because I thought you were having an affair. I found you in the bar, laundering money for the Russians. And when Dmitri bought me a drink, I let him because I was tired of being married to a stranger." Alexander's face crumpled. For a moment, he looked like the man she'd fallen in love with 12 years ago. The man who'd promised to build something beautiful together. "Elena, I never wanted you involved in this. Everything I did was to protect you, to give you the life you deserved. By lying to me? By committing crimes? By putting our unborn child in danger." Elena shook her head. "You don't get to be the hero in this story, Alexander. Not anymore." But as she walked away from him, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that Alexander's fear was about more than just getting arrested. There was something in his eyes that looked like genuine terror. Something that made her wonder if she'd just declared war on forces far more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. Behind her, she heard Alexander's voice one last time. "Elena, you have no idea what you've started. And you have no idea how this is going to end." The courthouse doors closed between them with a finality that felt like the end of one life and the terrifying beginning of another. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Asterisk, we need to meet. Tonight. Come alone. D***. Dmitri knew. And Elena realized that her carefully planned revenge had just become something much more complicated. Something that might cost her everything she'd fought to protect. The war between her husband and the Russians was about to become very personal. 9:47 p.m., Pier 47, Hudson River. Elena pulled her coat tighter against the October wind, feeling exposed despite the FBI surveillance team she knew was positioned somewhere in the shadows. The pier stretched out into the dark water like a finger pointing toward an uncertain future. She'd chosen this location because it was public enough to feel safe, remote enough for privacy, and had enough exit routes to make Agent Chin comfortable with the meeting. What she hadn't expected was how her heart would race when she saw Dimitri's silhouette approaching through the mist. Even from a distance, she recognized his walk, that confident stride that had caught her attention across the Meridian Hotel bar 10 months ago. As he drew closer, The dim streetlights revealed the same warm brown eyes that had looked at her with such tenderness the night her world changed forever. But now those eyes held something darker. Something dangerous. Elena. His accent wrapped around her name like velvet over steel. He stopped 10 feet away, hands visible, no sudden movements. Even in this he was careful, controlled. You look beautiful. Pregnancy suits you. Don't. The word came out sharper than she'd intended. Don't pretend this is a social call, David. Or should I say Dmitri? His smile was sad, almost regretful. You've been busy, little accountant. My father is quite impressed with your thoroughness. Elena's blood turned to ice. Your father knows about the evidence? My father knows about everything. Dmitri took a step closer, and Elena fought the urge to back away. He knows about Alexander's skimming. He knows about the FBI investigation. He knows about us. His gaze dropped to her belly. And he knows about our daughter. How? The question barely escaped her lips. Did you really think you could investigate the Kozlov organization without us noticing? Elena, we've been watching you since the first time you accessed Alexander's offshore accounts. Every document you copied, every conversation you recorded, every meeting with Agent Chun. We know about all of it. The world tilted beneath Elena's feet. Everything she'd thought was her secret weapon, her carefully gathered evidence, her alliance with the FBI. It had all been theater. She was the mouse who thought she was hunting the cat. Then why? She whispered. Why let me continue? Dmitri's expression softened, and for a moment she saw traces of the man who'd held her through the night, who'd whispered promises in Russian against her skin. Because you were doing our work for us. Alexander needed to be eliminated, but we needed it to look like justice, not murder. You gave us the perfect solution. Elena felt the baby kick, hard and insistent, as if sensing her mother's distress. I won't let you use my child as leverage against Alexander. Use her? Dmitri laughed, but there was no humor in it. Elena, you still don't understand. This isn't about leverage. This is about family. He reached into his jacket, moving slowly, and pulled out a small velvet box. Elena's heart stopped. In Russian culture, he said, opening the box to reveal an antique ring set with a blood-red ruby. When a man fathers a child, he takes responsibility. When that child carries the blood of the Kozlov family, that responsibility becomes sacred. You're insane if you think I'm going to marry you. I'm practical. Dmitri closed the distance between them in 2 quick strides, and suddenly Elena could smell his cologne, could see the golden flecks in his brown eyes. Elena, your husband stole $2.3 million from my family. The penalty for that is death. Not just his death, the death of everyone he loves. His wife, his unborn child, his sister in Portland, his elderly parents in Florida. Elena's knees nearly buckled. Alexander's parents don't even know about his business. Irrelevant. They carry his name. They share his blood. Dmitri's voice was gentle, almost apologetic. But if you marry me, if you become family, then you and our daughter are under Kozlov protection. Untouchable. And Alexander? Alexander dies. Tonight. My men are already in position outside his hotel. Elena grabbed Dmitri's arm, feeling the solid muscle beneath his expensive suit. You can't. The FBI. The FBI has no jurisdiction over family justice. They want Alexander alive to testify against my father, but they want my cooperation more. Dmitri covered her hand with his own. I've already made the deal, Elena. Alexander's testimony in exchange for my father's retirement to a non-extradition country. Very civilized. Very American. Then why kill him? Because he touched what belongs to me. The warmth vanished from Dmitri's eyes, replaced by something that made Elena remember exactly who she was dealing with. The night you followed Alexander to the hotel, you weren't the only one conducting surveillance. I was there watching my father's money disappear into Alexander's personal accounts. I was there to eliminate a problem. Elena's world shifted again as the pieces fell into place. You didn't seduce me for revenge. You seduced me to save me. I saw you sitting at that bar, so beautiful, so broken by what you'd discovered about your husband. I knew within hours Alexander would be dead, and you would be collateral damage. Dmitri lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. So I made you mine before anyone else could claim you. The romance of it should have been repulsive. A mob prince saving her from his own family's justice by making her complicit in it. But standing there in the cold October night, feeling her daughter move beneath her heart, Elena realized it was also the most honest thing anyone had done for her in years. If I refuse, Then you and our daughter die with Alexander. Tonight. My father doesn't make exceptions, even for his future daughter-in-law. Dimitri's thumb traced across her engagement finger, where Alexander's ring had left a pale band of skin. But if you accept, you live. Our daughter lives. And you get to watch Alexander's empire burn from the safety of my protection. Elena looked out over the dark water, thinking about the life growing inside her. Thinking about Alexander's parents, who sent Christmas cards every year and called her their daughter. Thinking about the FBI agents who believed she was their asset, not knowing she was about to become their enemy. What happens to my evidence? The financial records. They disappear, along with any trace that Elena Martinez ever cooperated with federal agents. Dimitri stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth against the October chill. You become Elena Kozlov, wife of Dimitri, mother of the next generation, protected by forces that make the FBI look like playground monitors. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the choice. Save herself and her daughter by joining the criminal empire she'd spent 3 years trying to destroy. Or maintain her principles and watch everyone she'd ever loved die for Alexander's sins. When she opened her eyes, Dimitri was watching her with an expression that looked almost like love. "Time's up, Elena," he said softly. "My men move in 5 minutes whether you're family or not." Elena looked at the ring in his hands, then at the phone buzzing in her purse with messages from Agent Chin. The point of no return wasn't a bridge she could cross. It was a cliff she had to jump from. Dimitri's expression grew cold. "Then Agent Chin arrests you for obstruction of justice and conspiracy, and you spend the next 20 years in federal prison, while I raise our daughter alone." He stepped out of the car, then leaned down to meet her eyes. "But that won't happen, because you're too smart to choose principle over your child's welfare." Elena looked down at the ruby ring, at her swollen belly, at the phone full of messages from people who thought they knew her. Everyone in her life was either lying to her or being lied to by her. Everyone except the man who'd just revealed himself to be the biggest liar of all. And somehow, that honesty made him the only person she could trust. "What happens now?" she asked, stepping out of the car. "Now you meet my father. You convince him you're loyal to the family. And tomorrow morning, you help me destroy Alexander Rourke so completely that no one will ever find the pieces." As they walked toward the elevator, Elena realized she was no longer choosing between sides in someone else's war. She was becoming a general in her own. The question was whether she'd retain enough of her soul to recognize herself when the battle was over. 11:47 p.m., unknown location. Alexander hunched over a stolen laptop in an abandoned warehouse in Queens, uploading terabytes of files to servers around the world. Insurance. Evidence. Testimony that would destroy everyone who'd betrayed him, including the pregnant wife he'd loved and the federal agents who'd used her against him. If they wanted to play chess with his life, he'd burn the entire board. Starting with the truth about what Elena had really been doing for the past 3 years. 12:15 a.m., Kozlov family penthouse, Tribeca. The elevator opened directly into an apartment that looked more like a museum than a home. Marble floors reflected crystal chandeliers and priceless artwork-lined walls that probably cost more than most people's houses. But Elena barely noticed the luxury. Her attention was fixed on the man sitting behind the massive mahogany desk at the far end of the room. Mikhail Kozlov was smaller than she'd expected. Mid-60s, silver-haired, wearing a simple black sweater that probably cost more than her car. He looked like someone's grandfather, not the head of one of the most dangerous crime families in America. Until she met his eyes. "Ah," he said in accented English, rising slowly from his chair. "The famous Elena Martinez. Or should I say, the infamous Elena Volkov." Elena's blood turned to ice. Beside her, she felt Dimitri stiffen. "Papa," Dimitri said carefully, "what are you talking about?" Mikhail smiled, the expression making him look like a predatory shark. "Your bride didn't tell you about her previous marriage, did she? Before Alexander Rourke, before Columbia University, before her convenient transformation into a forensic accountant." He walked around the desk, moving with the fluid grace of a man half his age. "Elena, would you like to tell my son who you really are, or shall I?" Elena's legs felt weak. This wasn't possible. She'd buried that life completely, destroyed every record, every connection. "I don't know what you're talking about." "No." Mikhail pulled out a tablet, swiping to a photograph that made Elena's world collapse around her. It was her, but 20 years younger, standing beside a man in military dress uniform. Colonel Alexei Volkov of Russian military intelligence. Your first husband. The one who died in a very suspicious car accident 3 months after you disappeared with $2 million from his personal accounts. Dmitry grabbed Elena's arm, his grip like steel. Is this true? Elena looked at the photograph. Herself at 18, naive and desperate, marrying a man 30 years her senior because her parents had sold her to pay their debts. She remembered Alexei's brutal hands, his drunken rages, the way he'd locked her in their Moscow apartment for days at a time. She remembered the night she'd finally found the courage to steal his money and run. It was a long time ago, she whispered. 23 years, Mikhail confirmed. 23 years since Elena Volkov disappeared from Moscow with money that belonged to the Russian government. Money that was never recovered. Money that I now suspect went toward building a new identity, funding a Columbia education, and establishing the credentials needed to marry a wealthy American businessman. Dmitry's face had gone pale. You've been running a long con. Alexander wasn't your first mark. No. Elena turned to face him, seeing her future crumbling in his eyes. Alexei was a monster. He bought me from my parents like property. I was 18 and terrified and calculating enough to steal millions and disappear completely, Mikhail interrupted. Tell me, Elena, did you target Alexander specifically because of his connection to our organization? Did you spend 12 years positioning yourself to steal from us the same way you stole from your first husband? Elena felt the baby kick, hard and insistent, as if responding to her rising panic. That's not. I didn't know about Alexander's business when I married him. Didn't you? Mikhail swiped to another image on his tablet. This is security footage from the Meridian Hotel, taken 6 months before you claim to have discovered Alexander's criminal activities. You're in the background of a meeting between Alexander and my son. You were watching them. The photograph showed Elena sitting at a table 40 feet away from Alexander and Dmitry, apparently reading a book. But the angle was wrong, the positioning too perfect. She'd been listening, not reading. How long have you been planning this? Dmitry asked, his voice barely controlled. How long have you been playing all of us? Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 23 years of deception crushing down on her. I saw you two together and realized Alexander was involved with criminals. I started gathering evidence to protect myself. That's all. Protect yourself from what? Mikhail moved closer, his presence suddenly menacing. From us? Or from the Russian government agents who are still looking for Colonel Volkov's missing widow? Elena's head snapped up. What agents? The ones who arrived in New York yesterday. The ones who've been tracking financial patterns that match your old methods of money laundering. Mikhail's smile was cold. Did you really think you could hide forever, Elena? Did you think we wouldn't eventually discover that our son's beautiful pregnant girlfriend is actually one of Russia's most wanted fugitives? The room spun around Elena as the implications hit her. Not only had her past caught up with her, but it had painted a target on everyone around her. They can't prove anything. Elena Volkov is dead. She held out her left hand. Make it quick, she whispered as Dmitry slid the ruby ring onto her finger. And make sure his parents never know what he really was. In the distance, Elena could hear sirens beginning to wail. The war between Alexander and the Kozlovs was about to end, but her war, the one for her daughter's future and her own soul, was just beginning. The woman who had walked onto this pier no longer existed. In her place stood Elena Kozlov, and she was about to learn exactly what that name was worth. 10:23 p.m., the Rourke penthouse, Upper East Side. Alexander pressed his back against the mahogany door of his home office, listening to the soft footsteps moving through his apartment. They'd found him faster than he'd expected. Through the security monitors, he could see 3 figures in dark clothing systematically checking each room, their movements professional, patient. His hands shook as he opened the wall safe, retrieving the go bag he'd prepared months ago when he first realized how deep he'd gotten with the Kozlovs. 50,000 in cash, 3 fake passports, and a hard drive containing insurance files that could destroy half the criminal organizations on the East Coast. Including evidence that Dmitry Kozlov wasn't just Mikhail's son. He was an undercover federal agent. The doorknob behind him turned slowly. Meanwhile, FBI safe house, Queens. Where the hell is she? Agent Chen paced the cramped surveillance room, watching static-filled screens that should have shown Elena's location. She missed her check-in 30 minutes ago. Agent Rodriguez looked up from his computer terminal, his face grim. Ma'am, we've got a bigger problem. The wire transfer Elena documented from the Cayman account? It just reversed. $2.3 million just moved back into Kozlov Holdings. That's impossible. The accounts were frozen pending. Not anymore. Rodriguez's fingers flew across the keyboard. Someone with federal override clearance unfroze them 20 minutes ago. Someone with access to our operation. Chun felt ice forming in her stomach. Run Elena's tracker again. I've tried 12 times. The signal disappeared at Pier 47 at 10:02 p.m. Through the window, Chun could see the distant lights of Manhattan, where their entire operation was either falling apart or being systematically dismantled. Elena's either dead, or she's just switched sides. 10:31 p.m. Dimitri's Mercedes, FDR Drive. Elena sat in the passenger seat, watching the city lights blur past as Dimitri drove with calm precision through the night. The ruby ring felt heavy on her finger, heavier than the wedding band she'd worn for 12 years. Every few minutes, her phone buzzed with increasingly urgent messages from Agent Chun. You should answer, Dimitri said without taking his eyes off the road. Tell them you're safe. Tell them Alexander escaped before we could reach him. Escaped? Elena turned to study his profile. Your men failed. My men did exactly what I told them to do. Dimitri's smile was enigmatic. Sometimes the appearance of failure is more valuable than success. Elena's blood chilled as she realized what he meant. Alexander is alive. Very much so. And very angry. And now he knows you've joined the family that wants him dead. Dimitri reached over to squeeze her hand, his touch gentle despite the implications of his words. Which means you're committed to this path, whether you want to be or not. Elena pulled her hand away, feeling trapped in a way that had nothing to do with the moving car. You manipulated me. You made me think I had to choose between death and marriage, but you were never going to kill Alexander tonight. I gave you truth wrapped in necessity. Sometimes that's the kindest way to help someone make the right choice. Dimitri pulled off at the next exit, heading toward the exclusive Tribeca neighborhood, where Elena knew the Kozlov family maintained their primary residence. Elena, you were never going to survive this war as Alexander's wife. The moment you started gathering evidence against him, you became a target. I'm offering you a way to become a player instead of a casualty. By lying to the FBI who trusted me, by protecting our daughter from a world that would use her as leverage against both her parents. Dimitri's voice hardened. You think the federal government wouldn't trade an infant's life for testimony against my father? You think they wouldn't disappear you into witness protection and let you raise our child in some suburban prison? Elena's phone rang. Agent Chun. She looked at Dimitri, who nodded. Sarah? Elena answered, injecting panic into her voice. Thank God. Something went wrong. Alexander never showed up at the hotel. I think someone warned him. Elena, where are you? Your tracker went dark. Elena looked out at the passing street signs, calculating. I'm scared, Sarah. I think they know about me. About what I've been doing. Who knows? The Kozlovs. I got a call. From Dimitri. He wants to meet tomorrow. He knows about the baby. Elena let her voice break convincingly. What if he tries to take her from me? Through the phone, Elena could hear Agent Chun conferring with someone in the background. Elena, listen carefully. We're going to bring you in tonight. Full protection. You and the baby will be safe. I can't. Not yet. If I disappear now, he'll know I'm working with you. Elena caught Dimitri's approving nod. Give me 48 hours. Let me find out what he knows, what he wants. I can get you more evidence. Elena, that's too dangerous. Sarah, this is my choice. My daughter's future depends on destroying the Kozlovs completely. 2 more days, and I can give you everything you need. After Elena hung up, Dimitri reached over to stroke her cheek. Very convincing. You're a natural at this. I'm not proud of lying to her. You're not lying. You're getting them evidence. Just not the evidence they expect. Dimitri turned into the underground garage of a gleaming residential tower. Elena, there's something else you need to know before we go upstairs. About my real relationship with the FBI. Elena's heart stopped. What kind of relationship? The kind where I've been feeding them information about my father's organization for 3 years. The kind where your evidence against Alexander was always meant to be the final piece in a case that would destroy my father and put me in control of the family business. Dimitri parked the car and turned to face her fully. The kind where Agent Chun has been working for me from the beginning. The garage seemed to spin around Elena. You're a federal agent. I'm many things. Agent. Criminal. Businessman. Father of your child. Dimitri unbuckled his seatbelt and leaned closer. But tonight I'm your husband. And everything I do from this moment forward is to protect our family. Agent Chen works for you? Agent Chen works for justice. Sometimes that means prosecuting criminals. Sometimes it means eliminating them. Dmitri opened his car door. Alexander will be dead within 72 hours. My father will be arrested and extradited to a country where he'll live comfortably in exile. And you and I will raise our daughter in a world where the Kozlov name means legitimate business instead of organized crime. Elena sat in the passenger seat, trying to process the layers of deception. And if I refuse to play along with this elaborate charade? Elena Volkov is very much alive, and pregnant with the child of a man who doesn't even know her real name. Mikhail turned to Dmitri. Son, you've been played by a professional. This woman has been working an angle since the moment she met you. That's not true, Elena said desperately, reaching for Dmitri's hand. The night we met, that was real. My feelings for you are real. Dmitri pulled away from her touch. Your feelings? You mean the feelings that led you to seduce me while married to another man? The feelings that convinced you to carry my child while building a case against my family. I was trying to escape an abusive marriage. Which marriage? Dmitri's voice was like broken glass. The one to the Russian colonel you may have murdered, or the one to Alexander Rourke you definitely betrayed. Elena felt something breaking inside her chest. I never murdered anyone. Alexei died in an accident. An accident that happened 3 days after you accessed his personal accounts and transferred $2 million to an untraceable cryptocurrency wallet, Mikhail said. An accident that occurred when the brakes on his car mysteriously failed. An accident that prompted a federal investigation that's been ongoing for 2 decades. Elena sank into the nearest chair, her hand automatically moving to protect her belly. I didn't. I would never. Wouldn't you? Mikhail pulled up another file on his tablet. Bank records from the Cayman Islands, dated 3 months ago. A deposit of exactly $2.3 million into an account registered to E. Volkov Enterprises. The same amount Alexander skimmed from our operations. The same amount you claim to be documenting as evidence. Elena stared at the screen, watching her entire world collapse. The account was real. The deposits were real. And she had no memory of making them. I don't understand, she whispered. Don't you? Dmitri was studying her face with the cold assessment of a federal agent. Elena, how many times have you blacked out in the past few months? How many mornings have you woken up with missing time? Elena's blood turned to ice. There had been days, mostly after stressful encounters with Alexander or difficult sessions gathering evidence. Days when she'd wake up exhausted with no memory of the previous evening. She'd blamed it on pregnancy, on stress, on the emotional toll of her double life. Someone's been drugging you, Dmitri said quietly. Someone with access to your home, your food, your daily routine. Someone who could use your blackouts to access accounts, move money, and build evidence of crimes you never committed. Alexander, Elena breathed. Not Alexander. Mikhail's voice was grim. Alexander's been under surveillance for 3 years. We know where he is every moment of every day. He paused, letting the implications sink in. The only person with unlimited access to your daily life, Elena, is the one person you trusted completely. Elena's phone rang. Agent Sarah Chin. Elena stared at the phone, understanding finally blooming like a poisonous flower. The missed time. The perfect evidence that seemed to appear exactly when she needed it. The way Chin always knew exactly where to find crucial information. The way every move Elena made seemed to serve FBI interests even when she thought she was acting independently. Answer it, Mikhail commanded. Elena's hands shook as she put the phone on speaker. Elena? Thank God. Where are you? We've got a problem. The Russians know you're alive. We need to move you tonight. Which Russians? Elena asked quietly. A pause. What do you mean? I mean, which Russian agency is looking for Elena Volkov? Because according to my sources, Elena Volkov died in a car accident in Moscow 23 years ago. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for 10 long seconds. Elena, Chen's voice was different now. Colder. You need to come in. Now. There are things you don't understand. I understand perfectly. Elena looked at Dmitri, seeing her own devastation reflected in his eyes. I understand that you've been drugging me for months. I understand that you've been using my blackouts to build a case against people I care about. I understand that Elena Volkov's identity was created by the FBI to infiltrate the Kozlov organization, and I was the unwitting asset you used to sell it. Elena, And I understand that you're the one who killed Alexei Volkov 23 years ago, and you've been using me as your sleeper agent ever since. Elena hung up the phone and looked at the two men who'd been manipulating her from opposite sides of a war she'd never understood. The room was silent except for the sound of her daughter's heartbeat echoing in her ears. "So," she said finally, her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind, "which one of you is going to tell me who I really am? And which one of you is going to help me kill Agent Sarachin?" For the first time since she'd entered the penthouse, Mikhail Kozlov smiled with something that looked like genuine admiration. "Welcome to the family, Elena. Now let's discuss your real mission." Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the lights of Manhattan twinkled like stars, beautiful and distant and utterly unreachable. Elena realized she was looking at a world she would never be part of again. But for the first time in 23 years, she was finally looking at the truth. 1:30 a.m., Kozlov penthouse. Elena sat alone in the guest bedroom, staring at her reflection in the antique mirror above the vanity. The woman looking back at her was a stranger. Not Elena Martinez, the dutiful wife. Not Elena Volkov, the Russian fugitive. Not even Elena Kozlov, the mob princess she'd briefly believed herself to be. She was no one. A carefully constructed fiction with implanted memories and a programmed mission she'd never been aware of carrying out. Her phone buzzed with another call from Agent Chin. Elena let it ring, counting the intervals. Every 37 minutes, like clockwork. Even now, Chin was following protocol for managing a compromised asset. The bedroom door opened, and Dmitri entered carrying a tray with tea and what looked like medical supplies. His movements were careful, professional. The tender lover from the pier was gone, replaced by someone who looked at her like she was a problem to be solved. "The tea will help counteract whatever Chin has been giving you," he said, setting the tray on the nightstand. "My father's doctor wants to run blood tests. See what kind of psychological conditioning you've been subjected to." Elena didn't touch the tea. "How do I know you're not just switching one form of control for another?" "You don't." Dmitri sat heavily in the chair across from her, and for the first time she saw how exhausted he looked. "Elena, I need you to understand something. Everything I told you about being undercover for the FBI, that was true. But there are levels of truth you weren't cleared to know. Such as the fact that I've been hunting Chin for 3 years. She's not just a rogue agent. She's been running unauthorized sleeper operations, creating assets like you to serve her own agenda." Dmitri ran his hands through his hair. "The real FBI doesn't know you exist. Chin built you outside official channels." Elena felt the baby kick, and wondered if even her pregnancy was part of someone else's plan. "What's her agenda?" "Personal revenge against my family. Her brother was killed in Moscow 15 years ago while investigating Russian mob connections to American politicians. She's been building a case to destroy us ever since, using methods that would horrify her own agency. Including creating fake identities for vulnerable women? Including worse things than that." Dmitri's voice was quiet. "Elena, you're not the first woman Chin has used this way. There have been others. Wives, daughters, sisters, all programmed to betray the men in their lives, all convinced they were acting on their own free will." Elena's stomach turned. What happened to them? When Chin was finished with them? When their usefulness ended? Dmitri met her eyes. They were eliminated, made to look like accidents, suicides, random violence. Clean endings to messy operations. Elena pressed her hands to her belly, feeling her daughter's movements. "She's planning to kill me. After you testify against my father and me. After you give her everything she needs to destroy the Kozlov organization." Dmitri leaned forward. "Elena, the evidence you've been gathering against Alexander? Half of it was fabricated by Chen's team. She needed you to believe you were investigating him independently, but she was feeding you exactly what she wanted you to find. To make me a credible witness. To make you the perfect weapon." Dmitri pulled out his phone, showing her a series of text messages. "These came in while you were changing clothes. Chin is mobilizing a tactical team. She's planning to raid this building in 6 hours and extract you before we can deprogram the conditioning." Elena read the messages, feeling her last hope of escape evaporating. "So I'm trapped between a rogue FBI agent who wants to use me as a weapon and a crime family that wants to, what? Keep me as a prisoner? My father wants to use you as bait. Draw Chin into the open so we can eliminate her." Dmitri's voice was carefully neutral. "He believes your life is an acceptable sacrifice to protect the family. And you?" Dmitri was quiet for a long moment. "I believe you deserve the truth. All of it. Even if it destroys any chance we had of being together. Elena felt something cold settling in her chest. What truth? The paternity test, Elena. The one that showed Alexander wasn't the father of your baby. Dmitri looked away from her. It was falsified. By Chen's people. The real test showed that Alexander is the biological father. The world tilted around Elena. What? You were never pregnant with my child. The night we spent together at the hotel. Chen drugged you with something that would make you black out, but not enough to prevent conception. You woke up in my bed believing we'd been intimate, but we never touched each other. Elena felt like she was drowning. The baby is Alexander's daughter, just like he believed before Chun manipulated the test results. Dmitri finally looked at her, and she saw genuine anguish in his eyes. Elena, you've never been my lover. You've never been my fiancé. You've been an assignment I was ordered to protect until Chun was ready to spring her trap. Elena stared at the ruby ring on her finger, a symbol of a relationship that had never existed. Everything was a lie. Not everything. Dmitri's voice broke slightly. My feelings for you became real. Watching you these past months, seeing your strength, your intelligence, the way you fought to protect your child. I fell in love with a woman who doesn't technically exist. Elena pulled off the ring and set it on the nightstand. A woman programmed to be exactly what you'd find appealing. Yes, a woman who never had a choice in any of this. No. Elena stood slowly, moving to the window that looked out over the dark city. 6 hours until Chen's team arrived. 6 hours until she'd be dragged back into a system that would use her until she outlived her usefulness, then dispose of her like broken equipment. There's something else, Dmitri said quietly. About who you really were before Chen found you. Elena closed her eyes. I don't want to know. Your real name is Emma Sullivan. You were a graduate student at NYU, studying psychology. You were walking home from the library 24 years ago when Chen's team grabbed you off the street. Stop. You had a fiancé. Michael Chen. Sarah's brother. Elena spun around, staring at Dmitri in horror. What? Chen didn't just lose her brother to Russian mob violence. She lost him because he was engaged to a woman who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. When Chen's operation went bad and Michael was killed, she blamed herself. She's been using you as both weapon and penance ever since. Elena sank back into the chair, her mind reeling. She stole my life because she felt guilty about her brother's death? She convinced herself she was saving you, giving you purpose, making you into someone who could help her get justice for Michael. Dmitri knelt beside her chair. Elena, every memory you have from before age 18 is real. Everything after that has been layered on through years of conditioning, drugs, and psychological manipulation. Elena looked at her hands, trying to remember who Emma Sullivan had been. Trying to find some trace of the woman who'd been stolen from a New York street corner and transformed into a living weapon. I can't get her back, can I? Emma? I don't know. Elena felt tears on her cheeks, mourning for a woman she'd never known she was. What happens to my baby if Chen takes me? She becomes another tool for Chen to use against you. Another way to ensure your compliance. Dmitri reached out as if to touch her face, then stopped himself. Elena, there's one more option. One choice Chen hasn't anticipated. What? You disappear. Tonight. Before the raid, before Chen can extract you, before my father can use you as bait. Dmitri stood, moving to a wall safe Elena hadn't noticed. I have documents, money, contacts. I can get you out of the country with a clean identity. You and your daughter can start over somewhere Chen will never find you. Elena watched him pull out a thick envelope. Why would you help me escape? Because Emma Sullivan deserves the chance to raise her daughter in freedom. Because the woman I fell in love with, even if she's a fiction, deserves better than being a weapon in someone else's war. Dmitri held out the envelope. Because I'm tired of watching good people be destroyed by forces they never chose to fight. Elena stared at the envelope, knowing it represented the closest thing to freedom she'd ever be offered. But she also knew what accepting it would mean. If I run, Chen will never be stopped. She'll create more women like me. More Emma Sullivans who get their lives stolen. That's not your responsibility. Isn't it? Elena stood, placing her hand on her belly. If I don't stop her, how many more daughters will grow up without their real mothers? How many more families will be destroyed? Dmitri's expression grew desperate. Elena, you can't fight her. She's had 24 years to perfect her control over you. The moment you try to oppose her directly, she'll trigger conditioning you don't even know exists. Then I'll have to be smarter than she is. She created you to be exactly as smart as she needs you to be. No more, no less. Elena looked out the window again, watching the first hints of dawn touching the horizon. In 4 hours, Chen's team would breach this building. In 4 hours, she'd either be dead, captured, or running for the rest of her life. Unless she chose a fourth option that no one had programmed her to consider. Dmitri, she said quietly, I need you to help me do something that's going to save a lot of people and destroy any chance we ever had of being together. What? Elena turned from the window, and for the first time since learning the truth about herself, she smiled. I need you to help me become someone Chen never planned for me to be. Who? A mother who will do anything to protect her daughter, even if it means destroying the woman who stole both their lives. In the distance, Elena could hear helicopters approaching. The final battle was beginning, and she was about to discover whether 24 years of conditioning could override the most powerful force in the universe, a mother's love for her child. 4:47 a.m., Kozlov penthouse rooftop. Elena stood at the edge of the rooftop garden, watching the 4 black helicopters circle the building like mechanical vultures. The dawn light caught the ruby ring she'd put back on her finger, not as a symbol of love, but as a weapon. Chen had programmed her to be the perfect sleeper agent, but she'd never programmed her to be a mother willing to die for her child. That was the one variable no one had calculated. The building is surrounded, Dmitri said, emerging from the stairwell with his father and 3 armed men. Chen brought an army. Elena didn't turn around. Good. The bigger the audience, the more damage we can do to her operation when this goes public. Mikhail Kozlov moved to stand beside her, studying her profile. You understand this is suicide? Even if you somehow manage to expose Chen's illegal activities, her people will kill you before you can testify. Will they? Elena finally looked at him, and Mikhail took a step back from the cold intelligence in her eyes. Or will they try to extract their valuable asset before she can be damaged beyond repair? What are you planning? Dmitri asked, though his voice suggested he already suspected. Elena pulled out her phone, showing them the recording app that had been running for the past hour. Every conversation we've had tonight, every revelation about Chen's illegal operations, her sleeper agent programs, her murder of previous assets. All of it uploaded to cloud servers that will automatically release the files if I don't check in every 6 hours. Chen will never let that happen, Mikhail said. Chen doesn't know about it yet, but she will. Elena smiled, the expression holding no warmth. Because I'm going to tell her. Along with everything else she didn't expect me to remember. Dmitri grabbed her arm. Elena, whatever conditioning Chen implanted, you can't fight it directly. The moment you try to oppose her programming, I'll trigger psychological safeguards designed to protect her operation. Elena gently removed his hand. I know. That's why I'm not going to fight the programming. I'm going to use it. Before anyone could stop her, Elena dialed a number she'd memorized months ago. Agent Chen answered on the first ring. Elena, thank God you're alive. We're coming to get you. I'm on the roof, Elena said calmly. And I'm ready to come home. A pause. Elena, are you hurt? You sound different. I sound like someone who finally understands her mission. Elena looked at Dmitri, memorizing his face. Sarah, I need you to know that everything worked perfectly. The Kozlovs believe I've been turned against you. They've told me everything about their operations, their plans, their weaknesses. Through the phone, Elena could hear the sound of helicopter rotors. Elena, we're almost there. Just stay where you are. I will. But Sarah, there's something else. Something about my real identity that the Kozlovs discovered. Another pause, longer this time. What about your identity? They know about Emma Sullivan. They know about Michael. Elena let pain creep into her voice. They told me you've been using me to get revenge for your brother's death. The silence stretched for almost 30 seconds. Elena, Chen's voice was different now, colder. Come down to the lobby. Alone. I can't. Dmitri won't let me leave the roof. He's threatening the baby. Elena injected panic into her voice. Sarah, I think he knows about the conditioning. I think he's trying to break it. Hold on. We're coming. Elena hung up and turned to face the 3 men who'd been listening to her performance. She'll be here in 2 minutes. And she'll come alone because she thinks I'm compromised and needs immediate extraction. You're using yourself as bait, Dmitri said, his voice full of admiration and terror. I'm using myself as a weapon. The way Chen taught me. Elena moved to the center of the rooftop, where the helicopter spotlight would illuminate her clearly. Dmitri, I need you to promise me something. Anything. When this is over, when Chen is dead and her operation is exposed, I need you to find Alexander. I need you to tell him that our daughter is his, and that everything I did was to protect her from people who would have used her against him. Dimitri's face crumpled. Elena. And I need you to tell him that Emma Sullivan loved him. Not Elena Martinez, not Elena Volkov, not any of the identities Chen created. The real woman underneath all the programming loved him and never wanted to hurt him. You're talking like you're not going to survive this. Elena touched her belly, feeling her daughter's strong heartbeat. Maybe I will. Maybe Emma Sullivan is stronger than Chen gave her credit for. But if I don't? She looked at Mikhail. I need your word that my daughter will be protected. That she'll grow up knowing who her mother really was. Mikhail nodded slowly. You have it. The sound of footsteps on the stairwell announced Chen's arrival. Elena positioned herself so that the rising sun would be behind her, making her a perfect silhouette against the dawn sky. Remember, she said quietly, no matter what happens next, no matter what I say or do, the woman standing here right now is Emma Sullivan. And Emma Sullivan chooses to fight. The rooftop door burst open, and Agent Sarah Chen stepped out with her weapon drawn. Behind her came 2 tactical officers, but she waved them back with a sharp gesture. Elena, Chen said, her voice warm with relief that didn't reach her eyes. Thank God you're safe. Am I? Elena turned slowly, and Chen's expression shifted as she saw something unexpected in Elena's face. Because I've been having the strangest dreams, Sarah. Dreams about a woman named Emma who was walking home from the library when her life was stolen. Chen's weapon came up slightly. Elena, you're confused. The Kozlovs have been drugging you, filling your head with lies. Have they? Elena took a step forward, and Chen's finger moved to the trigger. Then explain why I remember things Emma Sullivan knew. Things that happened before Elena Martinez existed. Elena, stop. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in 24 years. Elena's voice grew stronger. I remember Michael, Sarah. I remember the man I was going to marry before you decided my life belonged to your crusade for justice. Chen's mask finally slipped, revealing the desperate, grief-stricken woman underneath. Michael died because of them. Because of families like the Kozlovs who corrupt everything they touch. Michael died because you put him in danger. And when you couldn't save him, you stole another woman's life to make yourself feel better about the guilt. I saved you. Chen's voice cracked. Emma Sullivan was nothing. A psychology student with no future, no purpose. I gave you skills, a mission, a chance to matter. You gave me hell. Elena's hand moved to her belly. And now you want to do the same thing to my daughter. Turn her into another weapon for your personal war. Your daughter will be safe. Protected. Trained to be stronger than you ever were. Elena smiled, and for the first time in 24 years, it was Emma Sullivan's smile. My daughter will be free. Because I'm about to do something you never programmed me for. Elena, don't. I forgive you. The words hung in the air like a physical blow. Chen staggered back as if Elena had struck her. I forgive you for stealing my life. I forgive you for murdering Emma Sullivan and creating Elena Martinez. I forgive you for using me as a weapon against innocent people. Elena took another step forward. And I forgive you for being so consumed by grief that you couldn't see the monster you became. Chen's weapon was shaking now. You can't forgive me. The programming won't allow it. You can't break free from what you are. You're right. Elena Martinez can't break free. Elena Volkov can't break free. But Emma Sullivan? Elena spread her arms wide, fully illuminated by the morning sun. Emma Sullivan was never yours to control. Elena felt something breaking inside her mind. Not the violent shattering she'd expected, but a gentle unwinding of chains she'd never known were there. Memories flooded back. Studying late in the NYU library, planning a small wedding with Michael, dreaming of becoming a therapist who helped trauma victims. She remembered who she'd been before Sarah Chen destroyed her life. This ends now, Elena said, her voice carrying across the rooftop with absolute authority. Your operation, your sleeper agents, your crusade for revenge. All of it ends with me. Chen raised her weapon with both hands. I won't let you destroy everything I've built. You don't have a choice. Elena pressed a button on her phone, and every speaker in the building came alive with the sound of their recorded conversations. Chen's confession to creating illegal sleeper agents, her admission to murdering previous assets, her detailed description of 24 years of psychological torture. The helicopters circling the building belonged to legitimate FBI units. agents who were hearing their colleagues' crimes broadcast live. Chen's face went white as she realized her entire operation was collapsing around her. You clever little bitch. You used my own training against me. I used a mother's love for her child. That's something you never understood. Chen's finger tightened on the trigger. Then say goodbye to your daughter. The gunshot echoed across the rooftop, but Elena was still standing. Behind Chen, Dmitri lowered his weapon, watching as the woman who'd destroyed so many lives collapsed to the concrete. Elena looked down at Chen's body, feeling no satisfaction, only a profound sadness for the brilliant woman who'd been consumed by her own pain. It's over, Dmitri said, moving to Elena's side. Elena shook her head, placing both hands on her belly where her daughter was kicking with what felt like celebration. No, it's just beginning. In the distance, she could see legitimate FBI helicopters landing on neighboring buildings, agents who would need to clean up the mess Chen had left behind. There would be investigations, testimonies, a complete restructuring of the programs Chen had corrupted. But for the first time in 24 years, Emma Sullivan was free to choose her own future. The only question was whether she could build a life from the wreckage of all the lies that had come before. 6:15 a.m., FBI Temporary Command Center, Kozlov Building lobby. Elena sat in the back of an ambulance, a paramedic checking her blood pressure, while FBI agents swarmed around her like protective bees. The legitimate agents, the ones who hadn't known about Chen's rogue operation, were struggling to piece together 24 years of illegal activities while simultaneously trying to determine which of their cases had been contaminated. Ma'am, Agent Rodriguez approached her cautiously, holding a tablet. We need to discuss the evidence you've provided. But first, there's someone here who's been asking to see you. Elena looked up, expecting to see Dmitri or perhaps a federal prosecutor. Instead, she saw Alexander pushing through the crowd of agents, his face haggard but determined. When their eyes met, Elena felt her daughter kick as if recognizing her father's presence. Elena, Alexander breathed, stopping a few feet away. Thank God you're alive. Alexander, Elena stared at him in confusion. How are you here? How did you even know what was happening? Alexander looked at Agent Rodriguez, who nodded permission. Because I've been working with the real FBI for 8 months. Ever since I discovered what Chen was doing to you. The world tilted around Elena again. What? May I? Alexander gestured to the empty space beside her in the ambulance. When Elena nodded, he sat down carefully, his movements reverent as if she might disappear. Elena, do you remember the night you followed me to the Meridian Hotel? The night you thought you discovered my criminal activities. That was real. I heard you talking about money laundering, offshore accounts. You heard me talking to Agent Marcus Webb about Chen's operation. Alexander pulled out his phone, showing her a series of official FBI communications. Elena, I was never working with the Kozlovs. I was investigating them. Chen had been using my real estate company to launder money without my knowledge, and when I discovered it, I went to the bureau. Elena felt her carefully reconstructed understanding of reality crumbling again. But the evidence I gathered was real evidence of crimes Chen committed using my company's infrastructure. She needed you to believe I was guilty, so you'd work harder to gather information against me. Information that would eventually be used to prosecute the Kozlovs while protecting her own operation. Elena pressed her hands to her temples, trying to process this new layer of deception. The offshore accounts, the shell companies. All created by Chen's team to frame me. They knew that if you believed I was a criminal, you'd be motivated to gather evidence. They just never expected you to be so thorough that you'd uncover their own crimes in the process. Agent Rodriguez stepped forward. Mrs. Martinez, or should I say Ms. Sullivan, your husband has been our primary asset in investigating Agent Chen's unauthorized activities. When he first came to us with evidence that someone was using his business to launder money, we initially suspected him. But his cooperation and the intelligence he provided helped us realize we had a much bigger problem. Elena looked at Alexander with new eyes. You knew about Emma Sullivan? Alexander's expression grew pained. I knew the woman I married had been traumatized, had gaps in her memory, would sometimes disappear into herself for hours at a time. I thought it was PTSD from an abusive previous marriage, which wasn't entirely wrong. I just didn't understand the scope of what had been done to you. When did you figure it out? 3 months ago, when Chen forced you to take that paternity test. I knew the baby was mine. I could tell by the timing, by the way you'd been acting. When the test came back negative, I knew someone was manipulating the results. Alexander reached into his jacket, pulling out an official-looking document. So I had my own test done, privately, through the FBI lab. Elena stared at the DNA analysis, seeing her daughter's paternity confirmed. She's yours. She's ours. Alexander's voice broke slightly. Elena, every day for the past 3 months I've been terrified that Chin would discover I knew the truth. Terrified that she'd eliminate you before we could expose her operation. When you walked into that courtroom yesterday, I thought I was watching you commit suicide. Elena remembered Alexander's desperation in the courthouse, the way he'd tried to warn her about the Kozlovs. You were trying to protect me. I was trying to save my family. Alexander looked at her belly, where their daughter was moving restlessly. Elena, I don't know how much of what you felt for me was real and how much was programming. I don't know if the woman who loved me actually exists anymore. But I need you to know that every moment of our 12 years together, I loved you. All of you. Emma, Elena, whoever you choose to be. Elena felt tears on her cheeks. Alexander, I'm so sorry. For everything I put you through, for believing the worst about you. You believed what you were programmed to believe. That wasn't your choice. Alexander reached out tentatively, and when Elena didn't pull away, he took her hand. But choosing what to believe now, that's entirely up to you. Agent Rodriguez cleared his throat. There's more you both need to know. About why Emma Sullivan was targeted in the first place. Elena looked up at him. I thought it was random. Wrong place, wrong time. It wasn't random. Rodriguez pulled up a file on his tablet. Emma Sullivan wasn't just a psychology student. She was Dr. Patricia Sullivan's daughter. Elena's breath caught. The Dr. Patricia Sullivan? The forensic psychologist who developed the conditioning techniques Chun later used to create sleeper agents. The woman who wrote the definitive text on memory manipulation and identity reconstruction. Rodriguez looked grim. Chin didn't grab you randomly, Miss Sullivan. She took you because you were your mother's daughter, and she needed someone with the genetic predisposition to survive the kind of psychological trauma she was planning to inflict. Alexander squeezed Elena's hand. Your mother was trying to stop Chen's research. Chen took you as leverage to make her cooperate. Where is my mother now? Elena whispered. Dr. Sullivan died 15 years ago. Officially, it was a heart attack. But given what we now know about Chen's methods, Rodriguez left the implication hanging. Elena closed her eyes, grieving for a mother she'd forgotten she'd lost. Chen killed her too. We believe so. After your mother finished developing the techniques Chen needed, she became a liability. Rodriguez paused. But Ms. Sullivan, your mother left something behind. Something Chen never found. Elena opened her eyes. What? Rodriguez handed her a sealed envelope. Hidden in a safety deposit box, with instructions to give it to Emma Sullivan if she was ever found alive. Your mother spent 15 years developing a way to reverse the conditioning process. A way to restore memories that have been suppressed or altered. Elena stared at the envelope, understanding finally dawning. She knew Chin would use me as a test subject. Your mother was brilliant, and she loved you enough to prepare for the worst. Rodriguez's voice was gentle. The process isn't guaranteed to work, and it's not without risks. But if you choose to undergo it, you could potentially recover all of your original memories as Emma Sullivan. Elena looked at Alexander, then at the envelope containing her mother's final gift. What are the risks? Psychological trauma, memory fragmentation, possible loss of some memories formed after the conditioning. You could lose parts of your life as Elena Martinez. Including my feelings for Alexander? Possibly. Elena felt her daughter kick, strong and insistent, as if urging her toward a decision. She thought about the woman she'd been, dutiful wife, perfect victim, unknowing weapon. She thought about the woman she could become, free to choose her own identity, her own future, her own family. There's something else, Rodriguez said quietly. In the process of investigating Chen's operation, we've discovered at least 12 other women who've been subjected to similar conditioning. Women who are still out there, still being used as assets in unauthorized operations. Elena understood immediately. You need me to help find them. Your experience, combined with your mother's research, could be the key to saving them. But only if you're willing to risk the treatment yourself first. Elena looked at Alexander again. If I do this, I might not be the woman you married anymore. Alexander smiled, and for the first time in months, it reached his eyes. Elena, I fell in love with your strength, your intelligence, your compassion. Those things weren't programmed into you. They were always who you are. Emma Sullivan or Elena Martinez, You're still the woman I choose to spend my life with. Elena opened the envelope, scanning the pages of her mother's careful handwriting. Instructions for reversing 24 years of conditioning, written by a woman who died hoping her daughter would someday be free. When can we start? Elena asked. Agent Rodriguez smiled. Whenever you're ready. Elena placed both hands on her belly, feeling her daughter's heartbeat sync with her own. I'm ready to remember who I was so I can choose who I want to become. For the first time in 24 years, Emma Sullivan was about to come home. But first, she had 12 other women to save. 7:30 a.m., Kozlov Building penthouse. Dmitri stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the ambulance carry Elena away. His father approached, carrying 2 cups of coffee and an expression of grudging respect. She played us all, Mikhail said, offering Dmitri a cup. Every single one of us. No, Dmitri shook his head. She stopped playing and started choosing. There's a difference. You're in love with a woman who was never really yours. Dmitri smiled sadly. I'm in love with a woman who was never really anyone's. And now she gets the chance to belong to herself. In the distance, they could see FBI agents escorting Chen's body out of the building. The woman who'd spent 24 years destroying lives in pursuit of justice was finally facing justice herself. What will you do now? Mikhail asked. Dmitri watched the ambulance disappear into the morning traffic, carrying Elena toward whatever future she chose to build. I'm going to help her save the other women. And then I'm going to learn to love someone who's free to love me back. It wasn't the ending he'd planned for, but it was the one Emma Sullivan deserved. 6 months later, private medical facility, upstate New York. Emma Sullivan woke to the sound of her daughters crying and the feeling of sunlight streaming through windows she'd chosen herself. For a moment, she lay still, testing her memories like someone checking the stability of a bridge before crossing. She remembered Elena Martinez, the dutiful wife, the careful investigator, the woman who'd spent 3 years gathering evidence she didn't understand. But those memories felt like watching someone else's movie, distant and separate from the woman who now reached for her 3-month-old daughter. She remembered Emma Sullivan too, the psychology student, the woman who'd loved Michael Chen before Sarah Chen destroyed both their lives. Those memories were sharper now, more real, though tinged with the sadness of a life interrupted. But the strongest memories were the newest ones. The choice to undergo her mother's experimental treatment. The months of therapy to integrate 24 years of fractured identity. The decision to keep parts of Elena while reclaiming Emma. And most importantly, the choice to love Alexander Rourke not because she was programmed to, but because he'd proven worthy of the trust of a free woman. Good morning, beautiful girls. Alexander's voice came from the doorway, warm with the contentment of a man who'd thought he'd lost everything and found it returned to him transformed. Emma, she'd chosen to keep her original name, smiled as he approached the bed carrying a breakfast tray and wearing the paint-stained clothes of someone who'd been up early working on the nursery renovation. How did the night feeding go? He asked, setting the tray aside to lift their daughter from her crib. She's definitely your child, Emma said, watching him cradle baby Hope with the reverence of someone who understood how easily precious things could be lost. She demanded exactly what she wanted, exactly when she wanted it, and refused to be distracted by reasonable alternatives. Alexander laughed, the sound rich and unguarded in a way it had never been during their first marriage. Speaking of demanding what we want, he said, settling beside her on the bed. Dr. Martinez called this morning. Emma sat up straighter. Dr. Sofia Martinez, no relation, despite the shared surname, was the FBI psychologist who'd been working with the 12 other women they'd identified from Chen's operation. Good news or bad news? Both. The good news is that Jennifer, the woman they found in Portland, had a breakthrough yesterday. She remembered her real name and asked to call her sister. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. Jennifer had been Chen's asset for 15 years, embedded in a politician's family to gather intelligence. Her conditioning had been so severe that the doctors weren't sure she could be reached. And the bad news? They found another one. Number 13. A woman named Lisa who's been missing for 8 years. Alexander's expression grew grim. She's been operating as a sleeper agent in the State Department. Emma closed her eyes, feeling the weight of responsibility she'd chosen to carry. Each new victim they discovered was another reminder of how extensive Chen's operation had been, how many lives had been shattered in service of one woman's twisted pursuit of justice. Dr. Martinez wants me to come in next week, Emma said quietly. I know. And I know you'll say yes, because that's who you are. Alexander shifted Hope to one arm, so he could take Emma's hand. But I also know it costs you something every time you relive those memories to help someone else break free. Emma squeezed his fingers, marveling at how different this conversation felt from the careful politeness that had characterized their first marriage. Now they talked about difficult things directly, honestly, without the careful choreography of two people afraid to show their true selves. It costs me something, she agreed. But it gives me something too. Every woman who remembers her real name, every family that gets reunited, every life that gets returned to its rightful owner. That's what makes the pain worth it. Alexander brought her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. Have I mentioned lately that I'm insanely proud of you? Only every day. Emma smiled, then grew serious. Alexander, there's something I need to tell you. About Dmitri. Alexander's expression didn't change, but she felt him tense slightly. What about him? He's been helping with the recovery program. Not just financially, he's been working directly with some of the women, helping them process the trauma of being manipulated by people they trusted. Emma watched Alexander's face carefully. He asked if he could visit us. To meet Hope. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, bouncing their daughter gently as she made soft cooing sounds. How do you feel about that? I think. Emma chose her words carefully. I think Dmitri fell in love with a version of me that was created by someone else's agenda. But in the process of helping these other women, I think he's discovering who he really is too. Not a criminal's son, not an undercover agent, just a man trying to do better than the family he was born into. And you think Hope should know him? I think Hope should know all the people who helped bring her mother home. Emma leaned against Alexander's shoulder, breathing in the scent of paint and coffee and the particular warmth that belonged only to him. But I also think her father's opinion matters more than anyone else's. Alexander was quiet for another moment, then smiled. Then tell him he's welcome to visit. But he brings lunch, and he doesn't get to hold her until she stops crying. Emma laughed, feeling the last knot of tension in her chest dissolve. This was what freedom felt like. The ability to choose forgiveness, to build bridges instead of walls, to create a family based on love rather than obligation or programming. 2 hours later, the garden. Emma sat in the swing Alexander had built on their back porch, watching him and Dmitri assemble what appeared to be the world's most complicated tricycle. Hope dozed in her lap, occasionally opening her eyes to study the two men with the solemn consideration of someone deciding whether they were trustworthy. I think you're supposed to put the wheels on before the handlebars, Emma called out. The instructions are in Russian, Alexander replied, holding up a manual that was clearly in English. They're in English, Dmitri said patiently. But I can translate if you'd prefer. Emma smiled, watching two men who'd been enemies learn to be friends through the universal language of incomprehensible assembly instructions. It wasn't the life she'd planned as Elena Martinez, and it certainly wasn't the life that had been stolen from Emma Sullivan 24 years ago. It was better. It was chosen. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Martinez. Asterisk new victim located in Chicago. 28-year-old teacher, missing for 6 years. Can you come in Thursday? Asterisk. Emma looked at her daughter, at Alexander and Dmitri now engaged in heated debate about the proper orientation of bicycle training wheels, at the garden where she'd planted vegetables with her own hands and soil she'd chosen. She typed back, I'll be there. Because this was what it meant to be free, not the absence of obligation, but the power to choose which obligations to accept. Not the end of pain, but the ability to decide what pain was worth bearing. Emma Sullivan had spent 24 years as someone else's weapon. Now she was choosing to be her own instrument of healing. That evening, Hope's nursery. Alexander found Emma standing over their daughter's crib, watching Hope sleep with the fierce protectiveness of someone who understood how precious and fragile innocence could be. Penny for your thoughts, he said, slipping his arms around her waist from behind. I was thinking about names, Emma said, leaning back against his chest. Elena Martinez, Emma Sullivan, the dozen other women were still trying to help remember who they used to be. Having second thoughts about your choice? No, but I was thinking about Hope, and what name she'll choose when she's old enough to understand that names are just the beginning of identity. Emma turned in his arms. I want her to grow up knowing that she gets to decide who she is. That no one, not us, not society, not anyone, gets to program her to be anything other than authentically herself. Alexander smiled. I think she's already showing signs of that particular trait. As if summoned by their conversation, Hope opened her eyes and immediately began demanding attention with the lung capacity of someone who would never be ignored. "Definitely your daughter," Emma laughed, lifting Hope from her crib. "Our daughter," Alexander corrected gently. "And she's going to be raised by people who know the difference between love and control." Emma settled into the rocking chair, beginning to nurse Hope while Alexander perched on the arm beside them. Through the window, they could see Dimitri's car pulling out of their driveway, heading back to New York, where he was dismantling his father's criminal empire and building something legitimate in its place. "Do you think we'll all be okay?" Emma asked quietly. "All of us who had our lives derailed by other people's choices?" Alexander was quiet for a moment, watching Hope's tiny hand curl around Emma's finger with instinctive trust. "I think," he said finally, "that being okay isn't about erasing the damage. It's about choosing what to build from the pieces that remain." Emma looked around the nursery they'd painted together, at the mobile Hope was already tracking with intelligent eyes, at the man who'd chosen to love her through every version of herself she'd been forced to become. "Then yes," she said, "I think we're going to be more than okay." Outside, the sun was setting over a world where 12 women were slowly remembering their real names, where a crime family was transforming into legitimate business, where justice had finally caught up with a rogue agent's 24-year reign of terror. And inside, Emma Sullivan was raising her daughter in freedom, surrounded by love that had been chosen rather than programmed, building a future from the truth rather than lies. Hope finished nursing and looked up at her mother with eyes that held all the possibility in the world. Eyes that had never known conditioning, never been programmed, never been taught to be anything other than authentically, perfectly herself. Emma kissed her daughter's forehead and made a silent promise. "You will always know who you are. You will always have the right to choose who you become. And you will always be loved for exactly who you are, not who someone else needs you to be." In the distance, Emma could hear her phone ringing with another call from Dr. Martinez. Another woman to help, another life to restore to its rightful owner. Tomorrow she would answer that call. Tonight, she would simply hold her daughter and marvel at the incredible power of a woman who was finally, completely, gloriously free. Epilogue 3 years later. The Emma Sullivan Foundation for Identity Recovery had helped 47 women reclaim their lives from illegal conditioning programs. The foundation's headquarters, built on the site of Sarah Chen's former operation, bore a simple plaque. "In memory of all those who forgot themselves so others could remember." Emma stood in her office, watching 3-year-old Hope play in the corner while she reviewed case files for new victims. Hope was building elaborate structures with blocks, then knocking them down and starting over. A perfect metaphor for reconstruction, Emma thought. "Mama," Hope said, looking up from her blocks, "why do the sad ladies come here?" Emma knelt beside her daughter, choosing her words carefully. "Because sometimes people forget who they really are, and we help them remember." "Like hide and seek?" "Exactly like hide and seek. Except they've been hiding for so long they forgot they were playing." Hope nodded solemnly, then returned to her blocks. "When I grow up, I want to help people remember too." Emma smiled, watching her daughter build something new from the scattered pieces. Hope would grow up knowing that identity was a choice, that love was a decision, that freedom was something worth fighting for. And maybe, if Emma had done her job right, Hope would also grow up in a world where no woman would ever again have to forget herself to survive someone else's war. The phone rang. Another case, another woman to help find her way home. Emma Sullivan answered the call. "What did this story teach you about the power of choice, the strength of maternal love, and the courage it takes to reclaim your own identity? Sometimes the greatest battles we fight are for the right to be ourselves." Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories that will change how you see the world. Because everyone deserves the freedom to choose who they become.